Hello viewers, welcome to this video. I hope you're all doing good. In this video I'm going to show you how to install a Percona DB cluster in Ubuntu virtual machines. Sorry, I should have said Percona because in my previous video I used Percona. Okay, for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at my previous video, I did a video on um uh, Percona XtraDB cluster setup on CentOS 7 virtual machines with 2 nodes. Usually you go for odd number of nodes, not even number of nodes. So the smallest cluster would be like with 3 nodes. As this is just demonstration purpose, and once you got the first node, initialize the cluster, add the second node, it's going to be the same for all the other nodes. I did it with 2 nodes. Again, in this video I'm going to show you the same thing but on Ubuntu 18.04 machine. If you didn't look at my previous video, I would suggest looking at my previous video. For those of you who haven't looked at my previous video, I'm going to explain everything here again. Right, I'm going to use Vagrant to provision a couple of Ubuntu virtual machines. So I'm going to go into play directory and I'm going to git clone my Vagrant repository where I've got the Vagrant files. cd to Vagrant, cd to Vagrant files, and I've got CentOS 7 and Ubuntu 18. So cd to Ubuntu 18, and I'm going to edit the Vagrant file. I'm going to change the node count to 2 because I need 2 virtual machines. They will be called Ubuntu VM01 and 02, Ubuntu Bionic 64-bit. I only need 1 gig. But if you are in production, you might need more memory because when you're doing, when you bring up a new node, the state snapshot transfer has to take place, and it's advisable to have more memory. As this is just a VM and just for demonstration purpose, I'm going with 1 gig and 1 CPU, of course. Right, I'm gonna do Vagrant up, and it's gonna take 5 minutes to set these 2 machines. I'm gonna pause the video here and come back when it's ready. Right, Vagrant has provisioned 2 virtual machines, and I'm gonna clear the screen and get into the same directory, Ubuntu 18, and let's log into the first machine, which is Ubuntu VM01. I'm going to log in to the same machine on the bottom pane as well. Vagrant SSH Ubuntu VM01, and let's become root sudo su dash sudo su dash. Okay, right, what we got to do, if you have got firewall enabled, because we don't have firewall enabled right now on this machine, if you've got it enabled, you've got to open up 4 ports in the firewall. One is 3306, the second one is 4444, third 4567, and the final one is 4568. If you want to know what the 4 ports are, please follow my video on CentOS 7 where I've explained how to open up the firewall ports. But depending on which firewall application you're using, whether it's AppArmor or Firewall D, you have to open these 4 ports. Right. I'm going to bring up my browser here because I've got a repository with the install instructions. So if you go to github.com, just me and open source Percona, and you've got the install instructions for Ubuntu 18 and CentOS 7. Okay, that's Ubuntu 18, and I'm going to make few assumptions here. Because I've provisioned the machines using Vagrant, I've given it a name, Ubuntu VM0102, with the IP address 172.42.42.101 and 102 with 1 gig RAM. So if you're using a different machine names, and if you're not using Vagrant, make sure to update the IP address and machine names in the following steps, and the below steps wherever it's applicable. Wherever I'm using the name and the IP address, please make sure you put accordingly for your case. Okay, the first step is to add the Percona repository. So we're going to download a .debian file, and dpkg-i and the repository. So we're just installing the repository here, the Percona official repository for Ubuntu and Debian. So apt-get update, as you do always when you're adding a new repository, just to fetch the packages. So once that's done, we're going to install Percona XtraDB version 5.7. apt-get install -y. Let's copy this. So as you can see, the package name is not case sensitive, but if you try it on CentOS 7, it has to be case sensitive. If you just type this command, yum install, and the package name, it won't work. You have to give a proper case. Okay, let's wait for it to complete. Right, apt-get install Percona XtraDB Cluster 57. So once it's installed, it's going to start the MySQL service for us. Whereas in CentOS 7, the service is enabled by default, but it won't be running. You have to start the service, and you have to, once the installation is complete, you have to set a root password. But in Ubuntu, it's going to ask for, it's an interactive installation, so it's going to ask for the root password while it's installing it. So I'm going to enter a root password, and it's going to start up the MySQL service, and we need to start the MySQL service once installation completes. Okay, on the bottom pane, I'm going to tail the MySQL log file, mysqld.log. So as you can see, it has already started the service. So don't worry about these errors. Okay, the service is running. If I do systemctl status MySQL, so it's running. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop the service. The reason we are stopping the service is we're going to add the replication settings to the MySQL configuration, and then initialize the cluster, bootstrap the first node. Okay, so next step is to configure the replication settings. Okay, so the file we are adding is etc mysql/my.c. If you're not adding it, we are appending these content to that file. So WS rep provider, the replication provider, is Galera, so that's the path for Ubuntu. It might look slightly different on CentOS 7. The path might be a little different. Cluster name is demo cluster. Cluster addresses, here you have to paste the IP address of all the nodes you're going to use in this cluster. The reason I've left this empty here, and if you look at the second node, when we come to configure the second node, we specify the full address. That's because if you specify the address here, it won't bootstrap, so you have to leave it empty. Or there is another command, mysql ws something. We could use that, but it's quite simple. If you leave the address, when you start the MySQL service, it's going to assume that this is the first node, because it couldn't find any other node to connect to in the cluster. So it's going to assume that this is the first node, and it's going to initialize the cluster. That's what we want. Okay, that's done. And once the cluster is initialized, we're going to come back to this file and update the IP address of other nodes. Okay, so now we're going to start the MySQL service and create a user for replication. Systemctl start MySQL. Okay, that's started. We're going to create a special user for replication. So whenever a node comes online in the cluster, this user, the replication user, is responsible for we use this replication user to do the state transfer. State transfer is something like state of you transfer the state of one MySQL server to another. That's how the databases are kept in sync. So we will be using this user rep user at localhost identified by rep password. So if you see here, so we are creating a replication user and a replication password. So the thing to keep in mind is when we configured replication, we specified the SST, state snapshot transfer authentication, and here we have specified the username and password. So make sure the username and password you give here matches the one you're going to create now. Okay, let's copy this. Okay, so we've created the user, we are granting some privileges. So it only needs 4 privileges: reload privilege, replication client, process, and log tables. That's it. And finally we're going to flush the privileges. Right, that's it. We can move to one thing we got to do is we have to edit the file, because given the cluster is initialized. Wait, I'm going to show you something. MySQL -u root -p. Enter the password, and now you could do show status like ws rep, which is right set replication. So you can see here the cluster size is 1 at the moment, so we've got just one node in the cluster, and the provider is Galera, primary, operational, and if I go a little above, the state is synced, and that's the IP address of all the nodes. At the moment we have just got one node. Right, okay. Okay, let's go to, I'm going to open up another tab, cd to vagrant files Ubuntu 18. I'm going to log into my second machine on both the panes and become root. Okay, right. Similar to what we did on the first node, we're going to add the repository, we're going to install the file, install the package, and again, if you've got firewall enabled, open up those 4 ports. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, so back in the first node, we're going to edit the MySQL my.cnf file, and now given we have initialized the cluster, now is the time to update the IP address of all the nodes: 172.42.42.101, 172.42.42.102. Right, that's all we need. I'll again log into MySQL because I need to show you how it looks like when you added the second node. Right, add the Percona repository and dpkg-i. It is installed. apt-get update. apt-get install -y Percona XtraDB Cluster 57. Enter the password. Okay, Percona XtraDB Cluster is installed, and I'm going to tail the log file. So at the moment it's just a standalone MySQL server and it's not part of the cluster yet. So we're going to stop the service and configure replication and then start the service again. So let's copy this. And if you notice, we've got the same set of options, but except the two that you need to update are the machine name, node 2's name, and its IP address. That's it. Systemctl stop MySQL. So that's shutting down. And I'm going to paste the configuration. What I did. Okay, I didn't actually copy it. Right, that's done. Now if I start the MySQL service, it should join the cluster. Systemctl start MySQL. If I do that, what it's going to do is it's going to join the cluster and it's going to get the snapshot from the node 1. Okay, so that's initializing the cluster, and if you can see, proceeding with the SST, that's state snapshot transfer. So it's doing a requesting state transfer success. Waiting for SST streaming to complete, and so that's the CentOS VMO. Oh, why is it showing CentOS VMO2? State transfer from CentOS VMO1. That's because in my previous video I used the CentOS VMO1 and VMO2 for this IP address, so it might have cached it somewhere. Okay, so don't worry about the names. If you can see here, now it says it's joined. So let's log in. MySQL -u root -p and enter the password. If I do select user, host from mysql.user. So as you can see here, there is a rep user which we didn't create on this node 2's database. We've only created that on node 1, but given it's appearing here, which means the replication has worked fine. And show status like, let's look at the cluster status. WS rep. And now you can see the cluster size is 2, which means there are 2 nodes now. Is connected and it's ready. Provider is Galera. And if I scroll little above, state is synced. And now you can see the incoming address, the 2 IP address of the 2 MySQL nodes. Okay, and okay, that's the log from the node 1. Right, okay, so let's verify the replication now. So show schemas on node 1. So pretty much standard databases. And on node 2, show schemas. All the standard ones. So let's create a database from node 2. In Percona XtraDB Cluster, every node is a master node. So you can write to any node, read from any node. Unlike MySQL master-slave replication, where the write can only happen on the master node, and the reads can happen on slave node or master node, but you can't write to a slave node. You can write to a slave node, but it won't get replicated to master, so it's not multi-master replication. So whereas in Percona XtraDB Cluster, you can write to any node. So I'm on node 2. If I create a database, create database dummy, show schemas. So that is your database that we just created. Excuse me. If we go to node 1 and do the same, and you can see the database dummy got created. So right, let's create a table in dummy database. Use dummy. Create table demo name varchar 10 6 varchar 1 primary key name. Show tables. So we've got the table. Let's go to node 2 and see if you have got it. If you have got the table, use dummy show tables. So we've got the demo table here so it's real-time replication. So let's try to insert some records onto the demo table from node 2 and see if it's appearing on node 1. Insert into demo values Venkat, and the sex is definitely male. Okay, select star from demo. You've got that record back in node 1. Select star from demo. Right, cool. Our replication is working. So cool, that's it. That's Percona XtraDB Cluster, but make sure you've got at least 3 nodes in your cluster. Start with 3 and go with odd number, not with even number. If you search for Percona XtraDB Cluster split brain, that is split brain. So if you go with odd number of nodes, they say there is a problem which you might encounter, and the concept is called split brain. I haven't investigated much about it, but for this demonstration I used 2 nodes, but you start with 3 nodes or more. You could use my vagrant file. You could git clone my vagrant repository where I've got CentOS 7 and Ubuntu 18 vagrant file. It will be easy for you to start. The only requirement is you need to have a VirtualBox. Right, so 2 videos on Percona XtraDB Cluster, and in production, what you will normally do is set up this cluster underneath, and on top of it you'll set up load balancer, HA proxy or something for proxying and load balancing solution. So what I'm planning to do in my next video is to explain how to use HA proxy for load balancing. That will be my next video, but if you want, you can also use proxy SQL as a load balancing and proxying solution. If you go to percona.com, install Percona. If you search for proxy SQL, you could follow the guide to do proxy SQL. But I think I would go with HA proxy. So yeah, that's it. That's it for my this video. So if you've got any questions or comments, please drop me a comment. And if something is not working for you, I can help you. And if you like the video, please share it with your friends and subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed already. So thank you so much today for your time watching this video, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.